Thank you everyone for joining our webinar and our session today with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. And thank you everyone for joining. I'd like to introduce our guest today. We have the great pleasure to welcome Dr. Sylvain Charlebois to today's webinar. The title, as you know, Surviving the Squeeze, Tech Tools and Trends in Food Safety Compliance. Widely known as the food professor, Dr. Charlebois is one of Canada's most respected and recognized experts in food policy, supply chains, and food safety. He currently serves as Senior Director of the Agri-Food Analytic Lab at Dalhousie University, where he leads cutting-edge research that shapes national conversation on everything from food prices to food fraud and traceability. A prolific researcher and sought-after commentator, Dr. Charlebois has authored over 500 peer-reviewed articles and reports. I repeat, over 500 peer-reviewed articles and reports. His work has been featured in international media, influencing policy, public policy, and industry decision alike. His trusted voice for both consumers and businesses navigating the challenges of our evolving food system. We're honored to have him with us today to share his unique insight at the intersection of food safety, technology, and regulation, especially at a time when many in the industry are feeling the squeeze. Please join me to welcoming Dr. Sylvain Charlebois.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you. We met actually a few weeks ago in person in Vancouver, and was looking forward to this webinar. Although I'm actually I'm out of the country right now in Brazil, but we're basically in the same time zone, so that's helping.
That's amazing how far Brazil can be to USA or Canada, and we still have about the same time zone. How long was the flight to get there?
It took me 30 hours to get here from Halifax, so it's a bit of a drive because obviously there are no direct flights because I'm in Ribeirão Preto, which is about 3 hours away from São Paulo. And to navigate through Brazil, anybody who's been to Brazil will know that it's complicated. It's a complicated country. So,
absolutely.
So obviously, it takes a while to get to your destination, especially if you're in the agri-food sector. I mean, you can't really see many farmers in Sao Paulo or Rio. You have to get out and go out in the fields.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're gonna start. We're gonna keep that as a conversation. There's so many questions that we have for you, as an expert in that field, and that the whole industry has asked us to ask you, right? And let's just dive into it. And one of which, the first one, we're just gonna define exactly what we mean by squeeze and frame the conversation. So from your perspective, Dr. Sylvain, what's driving today's pressure on food processors' margin, and how has it intensified over the last 12 to 18 months?
Well, obviously, unpredictable costs are an issue. It's becoming more difficult to predict the cost structure of any company. And I mean, every week, every day, it changes for one reason or another. Sometimes it's human induced, sometimes it's not. With what's happening with climate, of course, we do see some effects on processing in particular, because all of a sudden, within days, sometimes they're forced to pay more for certain inputs without really, without being able to plan ahead. And so that makes things very challenging. And of course, from a geopolitical perspective, that's the big elephant in the room right now. In fact, at the convention here in Brazil, it's the talk of the town. I mean, everyone's talking about geopolitics and not just pointing fingers at one country in particular, but there is a different tone to trades. And of course, as a processor, if you're trade oriented, the geopolitical landscape is incredibly difficult to predict from one day to another. So it's been incredibly difficult and challenging. So if you're planning, it's very difficult to understand exactly how much capacity you have, what's going to happen to your costs and whatnot. So, and the other thing, of course, that we need to keep in mind is labor. Labor is
Yeah.
difficult, and every country in the world has actually struggled with this, including Canada. And
Hmm.
the mentality has been to keep labor costs as low as possible. And every time I actually visit a processing company in Canada, I end up seeing a lot of foreign workers working on the floor, and
Yeah.
not a whole lot of automation. We're getting there. I mean, it's some people are adopting more on automation, but it's still a work in progress. But labor typically is a bit of an issue, and of course, with governments looking into foreign worker programs, clamping down, immigration is an issue. So I do believe that that more companies will be pressured to look into automation, to look into skilled labor, and up their game when it comes to labor in general.
Absolutely. Automation is the key. I 100% agree with you. And we saw also, the emergence of U.S. tariffs. So how are trade tension, like, the U.S. tariff threat, influencing operational costs or ingredient sourcing strategies, for example?
Well, so we are in the food space. As you know, Tanguy, food operates with very, very tight margins. And
Yes.
so, and this is underappreciated by the broader public, I think. A lot of people
Hmm.
think, well, if you're in the car industry, if you're in minerals, uh, regardless, 25% is hard. But for food, it's actually even harder to
Yeah.
absorb. And that's why, as soon as we see tariffs impacting food, you see food inflation being impacted almost immediately. Uh, because, of course, companies, whether it's in processing, distribution, they have to readjust their margins, or they have to readjust their prices to protect their margins as much as possible.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's actually quite violent. I mean, it happens almost overnight. So governments have actually struggled to support the food industry in general, due to the unpredictable nature of some of these decisions. But overall, I would say it's just planning. I mean, if you don't know the rules of the game um, within the next trimester or quarter or half a year or year, it's incredibly hard to plan, really.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those margins, and I agree with you, Dr. Sylvain, because the margins are so tight in the food industry that a slight change can have a huge impact. We just had a contact that called us a couple of weeks ago saying because of the margin they actually have to close because they were running at less than 10%. And
Yeah.
it's very, very tough. 100%. Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely, and it's happening here and there. It's not
Right.
general. I mean, I would say that the food industry is quite resilient. It can survive, but not all
Hmm.
can survive. You have to know your numbers. You have to know your margins, and all of a sudden, your margins are compromised by these tariffs. And if you don't necessarily understand what's going on with you when looking at your spreadsheets, you get into trouble very quickly.
Absolutely. And in terms of the squeeze, what are the compliance pressures adding to that squeeze, and why many processes struggling to keep up?
Well, there's a couple of things happening. I mean, from a regulatory perspective, I would say that
Right.
right now there's a lot of pressure put on companies to be in compliance, essentially, and
Hmm.
that tends to cost. And the reason why it's so evident for companies that they tend to see regs, as we call them in the industry, as just costs. It doesn't generate any revenues, and it really upsets management typically to be in compliance. But these rules exist for a reason. It's to keep food as safe as possible for Canadians and people abroad. And this whole discussion about interprovincial trade barriers is very interesting, because all of a sudden, of course, you have many provinces with different regs in general, regulations, and C5, Bill C5, which is actually being reviewed by Senate this week and likely will be adopted once this recording goes on YouTube or any platform. My guess is that Bill C5 will complicate things a little bit between provinces, and of course it will complicate things with international markets. I was actually just talking to some colleagues here yesterday from Brazil and the United States, and they do see some headwinds essentially when you're looking at many provinces being allowed to say exports, or what standards will be used for the export market, and are you going to damage the country's reputation when you
Right.
actually decide to align all different regulations from different provinces. And so exporters, Canadian exporters, are actually quite concerned about that. And I can understand that, but I do believe that at the end of the day, we'll actually strike a proper balance, a functional balance between keeping food safe, allowing competition to prosper domestically while safeguarding the reputation and the competitiveness of our exporters abroad.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a strong point, and you know, a good one, because when you look at companies, especially the SMEs, you know, that are trying to export, whether it's USA, Canada, Mexico, they're trying to export, or they even try to do interprovincial trades.
Yep.
Right? They fall under the federal regulation, and sometimes it's very tough for them to meet that regulation, and then they can see that as a good roadblock, definitely. And the other question that I have for you around those lines is about food safety, right? Has food safety become more? I heard you talking about the reputation, which is a very good point. So has food safety become more about brand survival and less about box checking in today's environment? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the point or the expression food protection. It's about protecting the public, protecting your brand,
Right.
protecting your company. And this is a term that we're using more and more in industry, uh,
Hmm.
simply because really, when it comes to food safety, it's a boring concept. It's like
Right.
I've always said, food safety. Selling food safety to the public as a company is like selling a seatbelt with a new car. People will buy the
It's not
car.
sexy, right?
They'll buy the car, but they'll expect the seatbelt to come with it, and
Right.
it doesn't have to be flashy, but that seatbelt needs to work. That's really the
Yes.
most important thing. So I do think the language around food safety is slowly changing
Hmm.
to make it sound a little bit more strategic, because food safety is just not negotiable. And frankly, would you want companies to go into some sort of pissing match in terms of saying, well, my food is safer than your food? I mean, there's
Right.
no such thing. People expect safe food in Canada, and standards are pretty high. And we've actually compared Canada's record with other countries around the world, and Canada's record is very, very strong. And so the food
Absolutely.
safety culture in Canada is one of the strongest in the world. People expect food safety, and people are getting safe food. Now, some people may be listening to this and say, "Oh my goodness, well, we've had so many recalls. How can you say that, Sylvain?" Well, actually, the vast majority of recalls are preventive. It's
Yes.
about prevention, and this is why traceability is such an important feature. Is that you're able
Hmm.
to trace and track products, and there's anything wrong in your plant, you can actually recall products very quickly and very efficiently. That's really something that we're seeing more and more companies that don't take a chance. It's very rare now that you'll see a recall and you'll actually have victims, hospitalizations, and even death. We had one major case last year, the Silk Great Value case with soy milk. I'm not sure if you remember,
Yes, I
but
do.
it was under a Danone brand, and Danone was actually using a packer for its
Yeah.
product, and 3 people unfortunately died as a result of the recall, and many
Hmm.
hospitalization, and the packer actually ended up folding, closing, and so you can see that there's just no appetite for any failures at all.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think when you look at the incidents that led to the recall, there was some negligence, and so it's very rare that you see that. But you only need
Yeah.
one. You only need one to actually just ruin the party for everyone else in the industry, and that's really what some
Absolutely.
and frankly, it's just not acceptable anymore. So you want companies to remain as proactive as possible when it comes to food safety, uh, uh, food protection, and of course food traceability, which to me is probably the most important managerial tool that companies would have. And we're not talking about up up one, up one, down one, up. It's just not enough anymore. You need to be interoperational, connecting all the dots within the supply chain, and
Hmm.
companies, major companies, actually will do that now. They are not only looking at the data around the supply chain, but they're also asking questions to their suppliers, and frankly, those questions tend to be quite forceful and a little awkward because uh, suppliers may feel that they're being trusted, but all of a sudden, you have companies like Walmart and Loblaw asking them tough questions about food authenticity. And food
Right.
authenticity is really the other issue to counter food fraud. And food fraud is a
Hmm.
big problem. You know, there's every time there's a product that gets popular and gets overpriced, you tend to see a black market emerging around that.
Yep.
So that's certainly something you want to be aware of when you're a company operating, because you're up against some counterfeiting, and that counterfeited product may actually be much cheaper. And so people are drawn towards an illegal product while you're trying your best to be as honest as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned traceability, which is a huge component of food safety, and you also mentioned recall. If I remember correctly, I believe there are about, just in Canada, about 220 recalls every year. And and when I
Yeah,
see all those data, they're all preventable. You absolutely on point.
all recalls are preventable
Yeah,
for sure. But like I
yeah,
said, I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of preventive recalls
right.
to prevent hospitalizations. So,
There you
and
go.
there's nothing wrong with that. And
Right.
so that's why, like a measurement around food safety shouldn't be recalls, because of course a lot of companies are being very proactive. And
Hmm.
frankly, I mean, let's be honest, Tanguy, killing people is not a good business model. I
Nope,
mean,
not at all. It's not good,
so
for anything.
exactly. And so
Yeah,
that's why I
yeah,
think companies are being very careful.
yep, yep, absolutely. And we're going to get back to traceability in a few minutes. First, I'd like to discuss, to have your perspective on, those are, questions coming from, from the industry, who said, hey, because Dr. Sylvain will be there, please ask him this. That's about, the burden of the whole regulatory requirements. If you want to compare today to about 5 years ago or 10 years ago, how do you compare the regulatory burden? If you want to compare that, especially with cross-border shipment, for the companies or medium size, small size that are trying to, sell abroad? How would you compare the
Well,
regulation,
there's
regulatory
a
burden?
couple. It's a great question. I do think so. For one, I've never heard a company say that there are not enough regulations. I just want I just want to throw it out there. I mean, no company will complain that there are not enough regulations. There's
Right,
always too many regulations. You go to the US, in Brazil, that's what I'm hearing
right.
this week. Too many
Yep.
regulations, costing. I mean, so I don't want to hear that noise. It's just noise to me. Okay. So,
Yes.
I mean, if you have a government, the government is expected to
Hmm.
do its job, and compliance is quite critical. So you need regulations to make sure that you know everyone is kept as honest as possible. But
Right.
when it comes to regulations, what I find over the years is that, especially in Canada, is that you tend to basically treat all companies the same.
Hmm.
So whether it's McDonald's, Walmart, McCain, Maple Leaf, and all of the SMEs that we have, the small and medium-sized businesses, they all face similar regulations with little or no resources. I mean,
Hmm.
a company like McCain can hire a lot of QA folks to support
Absolutely.
and help the company. A small and medium-sized organization cannot afford to employ a QA professional on a full-time basis. Uh,
Yep.
so so what happens sometimes in some of the incidences that I've seen is that we see the CFIA, particularly the CFIA, try to kill a mosquito with a bazooka when it comes to small companies, and this is
Yes.
and I've always advocated for smaller organizations because um, I can understand from a regulatory perspective why you would want to treat everyone the same, but
Hmm.
there are two reasons why you don't want to do that. One, they are limited resources. The CFIA has, I believe, 3,400 inspectors. You cannot
Hmm.
have all inspectors inspect all companies every single week. It's just impossible. So,
It's not
uh,
possible.
a risk-based approach is absolutely necessary, I think, because there are some bad apples out there, and you want to actually focus on those bad apples as much as possible.
Right.
And two, you don't want to necessarily become a burden to a small company, and so that's why I think that Bill C5 transition, with
Yeah.
many companies that are provincially licensed being allowed to export outside of provinces, is going to be interesting to watch, because I do believe that the surveillance varies between provinces for sure. While some provinces do actually surveil quite well, in other provinces, like my own province in Nova Scotia, I
Hmm.
can tell you some food manufacturers have not seen an inspector in some cases over a year, and sometimes
Right.
2 years. So,
Yeah.
that those are the kinds of things that I suspect that provinces will need to address in order to keep these companies competitive,
Right.
and being allowed also to actually export outside their province.
Absolutely. And you mentioned C5. Just for the benefit of our audience, can you touch on a little bit on that? Just as a parenthesis, what's the C5 and why is it important for the industry to adjust?
Yeah, so C5 basically is the One Economy Act, essentially. Instead of having several provinces with different regulations, you basically will have one economy, recognizing that all provinces can sell to each other, essentially making the Canadian market more competitive. So
Right.
it's about labor mobility.
Hmm.
It's about, of course, the free flowing of alcohol and other products. But in the agri-food sector, you basically have a two-tiered system. You have provincially licensed facilities and federally licensed facilities. In
Okay.
in federally licensed facilities, you have to have an office of the CFIA. So you have a CFIA agent there all the time. When you're provincially licensed, you don't have to, and inspections are not as frequent. But that company is not allowed to export outside of the province, let alone exporting outside of Canada. So you need a permit.
Right.
But that conversion, let's say that you're actually a provincially licensed facility and you want to convert into a federally licensed facility, costs can be
Hmm.
unbelievable. I mean, I actually visited a plant about 3 months ago. They did just that, and it cost them
Okay.
1.8 million dollars. So it's very
That's a lot
expensive
of
to
money.
make.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you do that because you think you can actually do better and increase sales, but you got to be darn sure about that. And so
Hmm.
that's why I think it's good news for consumers to see that any company with a provincial privilege can sell outside, but at the same time, will people trust products coming from outside their own province? Because the local movement has actually has gained steam in recent months because of the anti-American boycott. If someone say in Quebec, will they see a product from New Brunswick in a friendly way? So that's going to be interesting to see.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, and we set the stage for the squeeze, right? We defined what it is, and we had some question from the industry. I want to go a little bit further. The next section, I want to discuss now some of the solution that we may have in order to go through that. One of the why I want to focus for now is anything regarding digital shift, what we see in the industry, and I'm talking about in food safety, of course. So, what are the main benefit in your view, processes gain from shifting to digital compliance, for example, especially on the regulatory scrutiny, the one that we just talked about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is the way of the future, but I was saying that 20 years ago. So, I mean, people who don't know the food industry will be shocked to learn that a lot of companies are still paper-based out there.
Hmm.
The food industry is a very traditional uh, industry, so they tend to not want to change a whole lot of things because the formula works, and they don't want to
Right,
compromise anything. And
right,
so to digitize anything is a bit of a leap for companies, and they just feel it compromises everything, compromises the culture of the company, and food safety is very much intertwined with the culture of the company. So I
right.
think there's a struggle there, but
Hmm.
there are more companies making that leap. Um, the main reason why you do want to make that leap is essentially because you have AI coming really hard, and the adoption of AI has been quite clear at
Hmm.
FarmGate with farmers. I mean, they've been using AI for a very long time, and in
Right,
processing, not in retail and distribution, the use of AI has been actually quite predominant as well, and it's only going to increase. In the
hmm.
middle, you have processing, and the adoption is actually lagging. It's not there yet, but it is coming. I mean, if you want to become more efficient, if you want to optimize your operations, you absolutely have to think about the use of AI. And if you're not digital, if you have nothing digital, it becomes way more difficult to do anything when it comes to optimization.
Absolutely, and we've seen that. We've seen, in other industries like, finance industry, automobile industry, many other industry have shifted already, right?
Yep.
And the shift is over 80% on those. You don't see accountant now do their bookkeeping on an Excel forms. And in the food industry, I 100% agree with you. Companies are shifting, but it's a little bit slower than the other industry. Now, if you want to touch on traceability, digital traceability, with the new traceability requirement, for example, from the CFIA or the FDA, how can digital tools make record retrieval and reporting more efficient?
Well, it's the speed of execution, really. I mean, it
Right.
boils down to that. And when you have a problem, there are lives at stake. Your reputation as a company is at stake, and so you want to move fast as quickly as possible. You understand exactly what's going on as quickly as possible, and you want to see exactly where are the critical points in your chain, so you can
Right.
actually intervene very quickly. And because I mean, the food distribution system is a complicated one, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and companies are just part of it. But inside organizations, you do have many critical points, but also you'll have many critical points outside of the organization that you want to be concerned about as well. And so if you digitize all that, you actually allow yourself to get a better understanding of what went wrong or what might be going wrong. So that's certainly something that you want to consider, I think,
Right.
when it comes to operations. The biggest challenge is cost. I think everyone agrees with what we're talking about. I mean,
Right.
everyone agrees. I mean, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Sylvain, you're right, absolutely. And but it is it boils down to cost. If you're
Yes.
looking at a technology like NORMEX, for example,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
you'll say, well, this is great, but how am I going to
How
pay
much
for
it
this?
is? Yes.
So, so as an organization, you kind of have to quantify what what losses are possible should you not have a highly functioning system, and that's really something that people need to keep in mind, because again, it's about cost. But at the same time, I do think that down the road, this is about saving and protecting. The other
Right.
argument that I would make is the fact that, like I said earlier, food authenticity is a problem. Food fraud is a problem. More and more people will be asking questions. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking about this in Brazil right here. Uh,
Right.
Clean labeling is going mainstream. People are concerned about the environment. You'll see some clean labels or carbon labels showing the carbon footprint of all of these things. All of these features will require proper traceability. So we've been talking about food safety, but there are other layers to this. There's the
Yep.
naturalization of food. There's the carbon footprint of products. And these are questions that people are asking, and they're just thinking, you know what? I don't expect the food industry to provide me with those answers. But here's the thing: technologies do exist to answer those questions. It's just people don't know that. But one
Right.
day, people will know that there is some capacity out there to allow companies to answer those really critical questions. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I'm buying a banana. Where's that banana coming from? What's the carbon footprint of that banana? I'm buying a
Right.
box of cereals. Are there any artificial flavors or colors in that box of cereal? And if not, well, what else did you put in there? And if so, what's in there? Allowed or disallowed by the government, doesn't matter. Policy actually will play a role, but at the end of the day, companies will have to start honoring this old issue of clean labeling and carbon labeling as well on their own without waiting for policy to take action. And that
Yeah.
can actually become a competitive advantage for companies. So, yes, we've been talking about costs, but
Mm-hmm.
also a digital tool to trace and track your own products within a global food supply chain can probably also reassure the market, inform the market, educate the market about your products, and that can actually probably be recognized um, as a value proposition, and that brings more market currency to your business.
To the business. Absolutely. That's well said. Absolutely. And
I know it's
talking
well
about
said.
the
That's why you called me.
exactly. No, that's absolutely on point, Dr. Sylvain.
And
That's
frankly,
exactly
I'm
why I
not
called you.
endorsing. I know
Yeah.
you have a great product. Normex is a great
Yep.
product, but I'm not
Yep.
endorsing Normex. But I'm using
Yes.
Normex as an example because, well, you invited me essentially first,
Yep.
and two, and I'm not paid for this, by the way. I'm not paid at all. Tanguy
Absolutely.
can
Yep.
confirm.
Mm-hmm.
because I believe in traceability and I believe in the technology and I believe that this that our industry needs a solution like NORMEX. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then I can confirm that, you are
Yeah.
here as an expert, as an expert in the field. And we talked about the market. And in terms of even market, when we focus on retailers, for example, retailers or even distributors, because we talked about the regulatory bodies already, do you see some pressures coming from them to the manufacturers to show more traceability, more compliance in real time, for example, or near real time?
I think the framework is already there. So you want to set the bar.
Right.
And I think our framework right now sets a proper bar. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're a company, do you really want just to be at the bar? Like really? I mean, or do you
Yeah.
really want to go beyond that and do something else, something different, and be ahead of the game? Because I do think that at some point the bar will change.
Yeah.
Because regs take years to change, years. I mean, every time there's a new act, it will. So the Safe Food for Canadian Act was implemented in 2019, I believe. It will be
Mm-hmm.
renewed, but it will take years before it's renewed. And so you want to be ahead of the game, and industry is always ahead of the game. And you want to remain ahead of the game as much as possible. Don't wait for policy to actually do the work for you and be forced into it. I mean, sometimes policy can be ridiculous. I get that. Some aspect of the act can be ridiculous, and some aspect of the act is not working. I get it.
Yeah.
And the implementation, the surveillance of it also is not necessarily working. But don't focus on what you can't control as a company. You have to focus on what you can control. And what you can control is your ability to trace and track products very quickly, and also your ability to provide information related to your products to the market.
Mm-hmm. Now, the last question on the digital aspect of things to speed up the process and traceability, for example, from what you've seen, we discussed the fear, right, from the industry to move past that. What are the common fears, in your point of view, companies have around adopting digital system, and how can they move past them?
Well, I would say, I mean, get the right people. I mean, it's important to actually get the right people, and sometimes people are just going through the process of buying a technology, and they think that it's all going to be everything's going to be fixed. The technology
Right.
will take care of everything. Technology is powerless unless you have the people to support it, the people buying into it. Okay. We saw
Yeah.
that with the ERPs. There's some horror stories about ERPs like everywhere. ERP implementation has been a nightmare for a great number of companies. It's the same thing with traceability. I mean, you want to absolutely keep an open mind and get your team and your people informed as much as possible. Food safety is not a matter. It's not a Q&A matter. It's an organizational matter. It affects every
Hmm.
single people in the organization. And you want to really focus on that as much as possible. Don't make this a committee issue or the responsibility of one person. Make this an organizational issue.
Absolutely. And now let's move on to culture. So I want to discuss a little bit on culture, leadership, and change management. Um, why do many food processors, for example, hesitate to modernize compliance system, and what can be done to change that? It's a little bit tied to what we just discussed, but in terms
Well,
of leadership,
there's a lot of well, we know best.
right?
We've always done it that way. I mean, those
From
are
the
the
last
kinds
30
of
years.
yeah, and it worked. We haven't killed anybody that we know
Yeah.
of. So I mean, there's a lot of that. Really,
Hmm.
it's human nature, really. Uh,
Right.
And the other thing I've experienced in my lifetime is food cultural fakeness. And
Yes.
and I'll explain what I mean by that is, and I won't name a company, okay?
Hmm.
I won't name the company, but it's a Canadian company.
Right.
So I'm often asked to visit companies, and I just adore, because you get a lot out of these visits, and it's not just about what is being told to you and what you see. It's
Yes.
how people behave, and the artifacts on the wall, and how you know the everything really. I mean, a lot of things, the colors being used, and what's on the floor, and how things are
Hmm.
disposed, and you pick up on a lot of different things after, I mean, many visits. You kind of have some expectations, and some companies, you can tell that some companies, their food safety culture is much stronger than others. And but there was one time I visited a plant. I was writing a case study on that particular plant, and as you enter the floor, the production
Hmm.
floor, you have to, put your gloves, net, your coat, wash your hands, and everything. And there was a board with names, and
Okay.
there were numbers. And I said, "What is that?" Well, it's people inspecting peers as they enter the floor, and if they saw like a hair or uh, something, they actually get a point. So you actually can
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's just, I mean, and if someone actually has many points, they get a prize at the end of the week or something. That's what I was told.
That's
Anyways,
the motivation. Yeah, that's great.
so I visit the plant. I
Right.
go home, but the next week I need to go back because I wanted to check something else. I actually missed something. The
Hmm.
manager of the plant was not there. His name was Carlos, and
Okay.
former student of mine. And he said, "Well, you know what? I'm not going to be there, but my assistant will be there." Okay, so I go in, and I took a picture of that board. Okay, when I
Hmm.
saw that, so I took a picture of that board again as I entered the floor the next week, and the manager was not there. And let me tell you, what I saw was, and again, I won't be specific in terms of what they're producing, but there was
Right.
water on the floor everywhere. There were ingredients on the floor everywhere. The manager was not in town. So
Oh,
the manager was not in town. So all of a sudden, you just felt that the bar just was lowered a little bit. The rigor was not there
yeah.
anymore.
Right.
And the board that I was talking to you about, it was the
Hmm.
same numbers a week later, same numbers. In other
Oh,
words, it was just an artifact. It was just there to make
yeah.
the company look good. It's a story for guys like me. Say, oh, by the way, we're doing this, and aren't we great? But it was just an artifact. So
Yeah.
culture has to be measured based on metrics that actually resonate and actually can make a difference towards behavior. Okay. It's not just
Yes.
about artifacts. It's not about artifice. It's about
Right.
real commitment,
To
mental,
have that connection.
physical commitment. Exactly. Whether the
Hmm.
boss is in town or not.
Hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
food culture.
That's food culture, yes. And it's very difficult. Well, it's difficult and it's not at the same time because the leadership needs to enforce that, if I understand correctly, right? They
Oh
need to
yeah,
enforce
absolutely.
the food safety
But how
culture.
do they know? Like he's not, like he wasn't, Carlos wasn't there. Like how do we know?
Yeah,
How does he know? But I
right.
did pick up the phone and I said, listen, let's have a chat. I told
Hmm.
him. I told him. So,
Right.
and I didn't name names, so I didn't want
Yeah.
anybody to get fired. But I just
Hmm.
this is what I saw the following week that I didn't see the week before because you were there, and they wanted to
Yeah.
look good. They didn't care about me. I'm just an academic.
Yeah. And let's discuss now the last section, the last portion of it, which is your um, some final thought and Q and A's. But we still have some question, obviously, for you. Um, One of them is about the cost, right? What are the opportunity costs, for example, of sticking with spreadsheet? Because we know many of them are still on spreadsheets, trying to do traceability, trying to meet the requirement of the CFI, FDA, retail, etc. What's the opportunity cost of sticking to that and even paper binders today?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll speak essentially about provincially licensed facility, and this Bill C5 will be an opportunity for provincially licensed facility. And but if you're still paper based,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's a moment in Canada that you would want to digitize your system, this is the one, because your expectations are only going to grow, and your network, your market is only going to grow. So in order to grow your market outside of your province, you're going to have to adjust in terms of how you operate from a food
Mm-hmm.
safety perspective, from a sales perspective as well, customer service. All of these things will have to be adjusted as a result. And so,
Right.
I would say, really, you want to be at the forefront of these changes as much as possible. That's the opportunity cost, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, right. Now, some of those manufacturers or processors, especially the small ones, right? You have some small who aspire and who wants to be bigger ones. They say, we're not large companies, we're not large enterprises. Large
Yeah.
ones they can invest in those technologies, they can invest in digital transformation. But if we have one process, one thing that we can do to make things easier for us, what will be your advice? What can they start with if they want to move towards that in any of the processes that they currently have?
Well, if you're a small firm, you can't really add people to the payroll. And so I would say start talking to people, start shopping around,
Right.
and talk to guys like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
understands the business, understands how solutions can be implemented at an affordable price. And there's no
Right.
commitment until you commit. So get information. Get as much information as possible about what's out there, and there's plenty out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots. I mean, I've been following food traceability for 25 years,
Right.
and my first collaboration was with IBM, and I would consider IBM as the pioneers. But since IBM, we've seen several companies going into the traceability space, and so get informed as much as possible. Regardless of where you are, I'm sure there are plenty of solutions, and so I would
Yep.
certainly start there and understand exactly what is possible and what is not. And frankly, there's no two organizations that are the same, and it's all different. And I know that there are many companies like yourself, like Normex,
Mm-hmm. Right.
is adaptable to your company's needs. And so you want to understand exactly, again, what can be done and what is possible.
Right, right. And what can smaller processes, for example, the same ones, small, even a little bit of mid-size processor learn from large organization when it comes to approaching compliance technology, for example? What can they learn from them?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can look at case studies. You can actually talk to. I mean, the industry is pretty small. I mean, so
Right.
I keynote the Canadian Food Safety Summit
Hmm.
every year. Tons of
Okay.
organizations in the room. Show up, go to that summit, and talk to different organizations. And there are suppliers there, and of course, there are companies using some of these suppliers. Talk to them, get referrals, get stories, and that's what I would do. And just show up as a participant and get to meet and chat with a lot of people offline, of course, and because you can accomplish. I mean, so food safety is a sensitive issue, right? Everyone thinks
Yep.
that like I'm always asked to speak because I talk about bad stuff. Like I talk about problems.
Yeah.
Companies don't want to talk about problems in public. You know,
Yeah.
if
Especially
you're a
when it's their
CP,
problems. Yeah.
yeah, and who wants to actually say, oh, I have an issue with an employee, I have an issue with a machine, I have an issue with my metal detector. I mean, nobody wants to brag about that, but they come to
Absolutely
me and
not.
ask me questions.
Yeah, that's important to show up at this type of event because absolutely there's many companies out there, especially large ones, if they want to learn from them. Talking about that show, I was actually a speaker 2 years ago, and there was some company that I've never approached before, and I was
Yeah,
able to chat with them and get some information about the way they do things, which is
yep,
a learning experience as well.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And now, what's your, what's one mistake example processors often make when attempting to modernize food safety approach? Are there something that you can learn from modernizing their food safety approach?
I think they always underestimate the time of implementation. You
Uh-huh.
need to be patient. Yeah, you need to be
Right.
patient. And yeah, so and that technology, regardless of the technology, won't fix everything. You need people to be on board as much as possible, and not everyone will be on board. So you want to make sure
Yeah.
that everyone's on board, but it will take time. It will take time for things to work. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing, of course, that I've seen a lot is that companies tend not to talk to their partners as much as they should, suppliers and customers as well, what it means to them. And
Right.
because they're shy, they're not forthcoming, because often they say, well, they probably were expecting this and we're doing it now, so we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to disclose anything. But you want to
Right.
disclose everything. You want to be open as much as possible, and share information with your customers and your suppliers.
Yep, definitely. And I want to have a broader question now, very broad in terms of your insight. What's your message, Dr. Sylvain, to food companies trying to survive the squeeze and stay competitive in a volatile, heavily regulated market?
I would say there are always opportunities out there, always opportunities, and we need to be bold. We need to think very differently. I do find many companies to be complacent, not in a negative way, but just complacent because they don't want to take risks. They think that they've done enough. They're growing and things are fine. But companies who are successful for many years actually do find ways to innovate in a meaningful way over an extended period of time. And so I
Right.
would say, just be bold and focus on innovation as much as possible. It's the only way a company can grow. And while you're solidifying your protection agenda with proper tools, you can actually start focusing on innovation and taking on risks, because you know that your foundation is well protected. So one goes with the other.
Absolutely. With that being said, we really appreciate you, Dr. Sylvain. That's We're coming to the end of the webinar, and I know you're a very busy man. You're right now in Brazil. What's the city again? Which city are you in Brazil?
Ripietro Tetro.
There you
So yeah,
go. And
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and
And
that's
it's a little north of. It's in the province of São Paulo, actually.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
São Paulo, yes, and São Paulo is about what, 2 hours from Rio, right? Flying, something like that,
Yeah,
around an hour and two.
something like that. Yeah, lots of
Yeah.
coffee around here. Good
Oh
coffee.
yeah,
Yeah,
good coffee. We're gonna
yeah.
have to come try that. I was actually last year with the family in Rio, and we never went up north, so we just stayed in Rio. That was for
Ah,
vacation.
okay. Yeah, I've never been to Brazil as a tourist, so
Right.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Very good. We're gonna try the coffee. Next time.
Maybe next time we'll actually have a face-to-face conversation in Rio on Copacabana Beach there.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go. Why not? So, with that being said, thank you so much for taking the time, Dr. Sylvain, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
take care.
Take care. Bye bye.